Good evening. I'm Joyce Vitello, the Philanthropy Officer at the Newport County Fund of the Rhode Island Foundation. And I'd like to welcome all of you to 2020 Vision, the third and final session in a series of forums focusing on economy, energy and the environment, and education in Newport County. The Newport County Fund of the Rhode Island Foundation has been a longtime partner with the Newport Daily News in hosting an annual series of convenings on topics of interest to residents of Newport County. These programs have provided a unique opportunity for the public to come together and engage in meaningful conversations on topics of countywide and community interest. It's an important way in which the Newport County Fund, as part of Rhode Island's only community foundation, fulfills its mission to help improve the quality of life for all of us who call Newport County home. While the idea for 2020 Vision began with the Newport Daily News and the NCF, the programs being presented are the result of a much larger commitment and collaboration between a number of local organizations, and I'd like to recognize their contributions this evening. Salve Regina University for providing the venue here at the Pell Center, the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission, who secured the services of VHB, who are donating the technology and staffing for our electronic voting component, and the Van Buren Charitable Foundation for their support of this interactive program element. I also want to thank the other partners who worked with us to conceptualize the structure and the content of the programs: the Newport County Chamber of Commerce, the Newport and Bristol County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Newport Public Education Foundation. As our series title suggests, 2020 Vision is an opportunity to examine where we are now and create a vision for where we want our communities to be in 2020 in several vital areas. And as we can see from this amazing turnout here this evening, education is certainly one of those very important areas. So let's begin that conversation, and I'll turn the program over to our moderator, Sheila Malawi, Executive Editor of the Newport Daily News.
Thank you, Joyce. It is certainly very encouraging to see everybody here tonight, an overflow crowd, some students who are here and to be part of the conversation, and I really appreciate that. We really do hope that you will get as much out of these conversations as we have. The opportunity for us to hear from Newport County residents about what they think is important and what they would like to pursue as goals to shape their communities over the next 10 years is vital to us as a community newspaper. Just as Joyce mentioned, it's vital to the Newport County Fund in terms of supporting its mission here. And we've had great speakers so far, and we're really thrilled to have the Education Commissioner for the state of Rhode Island, Deborah Gist, here, who's been one of Time's most interesting people, who we already know is a very dynamic speaker, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about the future of education in Rhode Island as well as in Newport County. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. All right, we'll see if I can figure out how to do this here. My props. I'm so happy to be back in Newport. It's good to see you all. You know, it's interesting, many of you have heard me say that before I came to Rhode Island to interview as Commissioner of Education, the only place I'd ever been in Rhode Island is Newport, as a tourist, of course, right down here in this area. And so it's wonderful to come back now as a member of this community of our state and to feel, you know, my own sense of love and appreciation and pride for all of the people who are gathered here tonight in this wonderful community, and especially to see it through different eyes, because when you travel someplace as a tourist, you know, you don't have a full appreciation for the richness of what's there in the community, and so it's been just incredible to have the experience to become more and more a part of this community. I am so excited about this idea of this Vision 2020 series, and I don't know how many of you all have been to the other series on the environment or the economy, but it's wonderful and so important to bring members of the community together to talk about these issues, because collectively we have the ability to resolve these challenges that are before us. And when we're working together and having a dialogue, we're going to be most successful. One of the things I've appreciated about Newport, and I come down here quite a lot actually, is how much the community is focused on the issue of education, and in particular how much the community is connecting the economy and education. And in fact, I spoke fairly recently before the Chamber of Commerce, the Newport Chamber of Commerce, and then more recently at, I forgot the name of that event. It was a group that came together to talk about the connection between education and the economy. And I think that that's a really important connection to make, and it's one that we'll address a little bit tonight. So let me just take a minute to thank the Newport County Fund and the Rhode Island Foundation, and obviously the Newport Daily News, Sheila and her team, and our hosts here at Salve, Regina, for putting this on. I also know there are a number of folks out across the room, members of school committees from both Newport, Joey Gaines and Leanne Benton from Middletown, and other members of the Newport School Committee, and probably others who I may be missing, but real leaders in education and folks that I'm very excited about working with as we move forward. I also just want to point out that we have had, you know, the excitement and success and momentum that we've had around education in the state in the last year has also been led by our elected officials. And even in our recent efforts around the race to the top, members of the General Assembly have been actively involved in that work, and in particular, President Hyde-Weed, Teresa Hyde-Weed, who is, as you know, President of the Senate and also right here from Newport, has been instrumental and has traveled to Washington, D.C. with us on numerous occasions to help us to lead this effort and to bring that $75 million back to the state. And so I just wanted to recognize her and thank you all for your involvement in that work. So here we are. It is what, September? Tonight is actually the last day of summer, right? Or today is, which is kind of hard to believe. Which means that I think I'm not new anymore. We can sort of say my first year is well behind us. We're well into our second year, and you know, I think back meeting the students back here and thinking about my career and how I ended up here in Rhode Island now as the Commissioner of Education. And I just thought I'd take a minute to tell you that I never intended to become the commissioner of anything, or the superintendent, or even a principal. I wanted to be a teacher, and that was all I really wanted to do, and never intended to leave the classroom. And so when I have the chance to interact with teachers, which I get to do, fortunately, really often, or aspiring teachers, it really takes me back and reminds me of how important it is that we are supporting our teachers every day. But I haven't forgotten that, and you know, we just passed the beginning of school, that back to school feeling. That always makes me reminisce about my years as a teacher, and makes me think about what a wonderful, important, and awesome responsibility teaching is. And there's absolutely nothing like it, but it is an incredibly challenging and incredibly rewarding responsibility all at once. And one of the things I would say about it that I think those who haven't been in the classroom don't always realize, unless maybe you live with a teacher, that how, you know, we need to tackle something in our education system. And that is that so many of our educators are working so hard in the classroom every day, but it's as if what they do is, it's like pushing the boulder uphill. It's like the system is not supporting what they do and helping them to propel their students forward. But it's almost as if when you're in the classroom that you sometimes feel like the system is pushing against you. And so I think it's important for us to acknowledge that dynamic. And as commissioner and school committee members and superintendents and everyone who is in education who is not a classroom teacher,
has to own this responsibility of making sure that we shift that dynamic, that we're helping teachers to roll that boulder downhill, not to be working against the system. And it's a change to our bureaucracy, streamlining that bureaucracy, changing our focus, reminding ourselves what it's really all about. There has to be a really dramatic change. So imagine you're a teacher, and every year, or frequently anyway, maybe you have a new principal, or your superintendent changes in your district, or you get a new commissioner, or whatever it might be, and then suddenly everything that a couple of years ago you were told was the most important thing for you to do then shifts, and now the most important thing is something else. And so you diligently start down that track, and you're focused on that thing, and then it changes again. And too often we don't engage our educators as the central voice of what we're doing, and they must be. So that's kind of a little bit about the teacher's perspective, which I've experienced and did experience for many years. So now imagine that you're a principal. So you're a principal, you were almost surely a teacher for a number of years, and decided it would be great to have the chance to build a culture in a school and really lead a school forward. And so you assume this responsibility, and you're going to be held accountable for the performance of the students in your school. You are publicly going to be the face of the performance of that school. But you don't really have a lot of control over who teaches in your school. Even if there's a vacancy, you may or may not have the ability to be the one to make the decision to fill that vacancy. The system makes it incredibly difficult for you to move anyone out of your school. If you feel like you have someone who isn't performing, it is very, very challenging and very time-consuming to make any changes there. If you have folks in your building, teachers in your building who need support, who you think are doing a pretty good job, but you'd like to help them grow and develop, you may not know that there are many contracts in our state where principals can't have staff meetings that are required, or they can have 4 a year. I know one contract says 4 a year meetings. Imagine as a supervisor that you can only meet with the people on your team 4 times a year. And even then, in some cases, you can't make them come, meaning that they may or may not, depending on if they're available that day, be able to come to this meeting to talk about your shared work as a team. So imagine you're that principal, and again, you're held accountable for the performance in that school, but this is the way in which your hands are tied. So, the teachers have this experience, principals who have this experience. So then imagine you're the superintendent or a school committee member, and you've been, let's say you're a school committee member, you've been elected to this position, you wanted to serve your community. So you've gone out, and you've knocked on doors, and you've asked your neighbors to support you in this role. And then you get into this position. Every minute, your phone's ringing, and people are asking you, we need this, and we need this, and you need to fix this, and my son says that the window's broken, and all kind of trying to respond to everybody's needs. And the next thing you know, the General Assembly has reduced your budget by another 5%. Let's say this is maybe the second or third year in the row that this has happened. And so you have a budget that you've got to figure out how to balance, but you're tied into some contracts that don't give you the ability to make the kind of changes that, perhaps if you were a business person, that you could, look at your budget and say, okay, we're going to have to do this differently and this differently, and you'd be able to make some decisions. But everything is so, recalcitrant that it is very little flexibility, or it certainly is often the case that's the case. And so why am I describing all this? This sounds like kind of a downer, right? I guess I just want to make sure that you all know that when you probably hear a lot about the work that I do or that we're doing, and sometimes people think that that's targeted at any certain group of individuals, or what's often called blaming. You're blaming the teachers, or we're blaming the General Assembly, or oftentimes people blame the children or the parents. Here's what we have to do as a community, folks. We can't blame anybody. Because while obviously there are a few people that get into roles and we're not sure why they're there, but for the vast majority of people who are teaching, who are leading school buildings, who are serving their public as an elected school committee member or an elected official, or have taken the challenge of leading a school district as a superintendent, are doing that because they want to do the right thing for children. So if we start with that assumption and then we say, okay, this is the situation that we have. So why is it that our system works against these well-meaning individuals and slows us down to the point that we can't make the kind of change and the kind of progress that we need to make? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. And then I don't want to forget a couple of other groups that I just threw out there. Students and parents themselves. Because so often people will say, well, Commissioner, you don't understand, you're expecting the teachers to be held accountable for the performance of their students, but if the students don't show up at school and they haven't done their homework, or they haven't been read to since they were babies, or have maybe not eaten properly, or maybe there's stress in their house, or perhaps their family doesn't speak English, then how can the teacher be held responsible? Parents have to be responsible too. Or let's say that we're talking about high school students, and maybe they attendance is a problem, or they're distracted by other things that are going on in their lives or whatnot. And so my response to all of that is that it's yes, 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 and yes. So it isn't that when we say that we're focusing on our classroom teachers, that it doesn't mean that we don't think that we need to encourage our parents and our students to be more engaged and personally responsible. We do. So I just wanted to set the stage a little bit, with where we are there. Now, when I last year had the chance to visit every community, and in every community I met with teachers, with students, with parents most of the time, with the school committee members of the community most of the time, and I'm getting ready to do that again, actually. So we're going to do those visits again this year as follow-up. Over and over and over and over again, I met groups of students who told me what their great teachers do and told me they want to be challenged. And I met teachers who want to be a part of the solution. And I met parents who are desperate to see an improved education system in our state, and elected leaders and business leaders and faith-based leaders who also want that. So we have the will, and what we have to do is make sure that we're willing to challenge the, what sometimes are called sacred cows, or the things that we are afraid to talk about because they've been in place for so long, or they've been done for so long that it's an accepted way of going about business. And when we do challenge those things, we have to challenge them respectfully, but also without wavering about what needs to be different. So we feel like we have a great plan, and we were validated in the plan that we developed fairly recently when we were awarded the Race to the Top grant from the U.S. Department of Education. And for us, I think this did a couple of things. For one thing, based on how we were ranked in that, it showed us that we were one of the top states in the country in terms of the quality of the plan that we have in place. And I have had people say that our central part of our plan was on great teachers and leaders. We've had a number of independent groups declare that our part of that plan was the best in the country. So we have the right steps before us. We know what our path is. And I feel really confident that people all across the state have committed to this plan, that our school committee members, our superintendents, and others are committed to this plan. And then we got the good news that we have now the resources to go along with that. So the $75 million that we awarded is actually, it's my understanding, the largest competitive federal grant that the state has ever received. So it's a big deal and a big resource. It's only, though, for 4 years. So this funding is coming in and then it's going away. And we cannot put anything in place that causes us to rely upon that funding. We have to invest that funding in ways that can help us to take the system from the one that we have today to the one that we envision, but one that we can carry out with the resources that we already invest in education. or perhaps, given our revenue situation, perhaps even a little bit less. But we have to be able to sustain it with what Rhode Islanders already invest in education. So this funding won't help us meet any upcoming or current budget stresses. That's not the purpose of it. And it's not there to help us to do things like lower class size or lengthen the school year or anything like that, because those would be things that we would have to continue if the funding went away. So instead, what we're using the funding for is, first of all, a significant amount of professional development to redesign the way in which we deliver education and give our educators the support that they need to be more successful. And it's also to help us design some tools, some resources, and some systems for our educators to use. And some of that professional development is supporting them in using it. So that includes the new educator evaluation system and giving our educators actionable feedback on their performance and regular feedback on their performance. It's an improved data system so that we all have better information about how our students are achieving and where we need to help them and help them to improve. And it's also there's a wonderful tool that's being developed that's called instructional management system, and it's going to help our educators share and use curriculum that is aligned to our standards in ways that will be much more efficient across our state, because we have 36 school districts, and it doesn't make sense for us to have 36 different sets of curricula. We need to have much more ability to share that curricula from district to district. And there are a whole lot more, a lot of other things that we're developing, but I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the things that we're going to be doing, investing in with those resources. So the other thing I think that you have to have in any plan are very clear sets of goals for how you're going to know when you're successful. And so we have set some very ambitious goals around our performance. So for one thing, we're going to increase our graduation rate. Right now in our state, about 75% of our students are graduating from high school statewide. So that means that 1 out of 4 students is leaving high school without a diploma. And in this economy, folks, that is almost surely a recipe for a life that will almost surely never result in a living wage and a quality of life that any of us would want for our own families. It's going to be a lot of struggle, because the jobs that are in this economy now and certainly in the future are requiring at least a high school diploma, and most of the time some kind of post-secondary education, either college or community college or technical training. So we want to increase that graduation rate. Our goal is that by 2015 that will be 85%. We also want to make sure that more of our students are going on to college. Now, all the time people will say to me, Commissioner, not all students want to go to college. And I think that that's true, and we need to make sure that students have options available to them and that they know what those options are and those pathways are clear. But let me tell you, folks, right now, of the students who do graduate, and remember, it's only 3 out of 4, only about half are going on to college. About half, which ranks us 43rd in the country in terms of the college-going rate. And that is not a rate that will sustain a vibrant economy in our state that will help us to compete in this kind of 21st century global economy that we're living in. So we must increase the number of students who are prepared for and going on to post-secondary education. And again, that can take different forms. We have some specific goals around student achievement, student proficiency. We also have goals about not only students going to college, but those who are completing at least a 2-year degree. And we also have goals around what we call our achievement gaps. Now, some of you are educators and some of you are leaders in education. You may be familiar with this term, but in case you're not, when we say achievement gap, what we mean by that is that different groups of students perform at different levels. And those groups, we can categorize them in different ways. So sometimes we look at students who have identified disabilities and those who don't, or students whose families live in poverty and those who don't. Students who are Black, Hispanic, or Asian, or white, and how that performance compares. Or students whose families speak another language. And so when we look at those performance gaps in our state, they are huge. So we have a real something that is going on in our state where we're not serving students well, who are students of color in particular, students with disabilities, and students whose families live in poverty. And that's something that we must address. Now, again, people will say to me, Commissioner, but students whose families are poor, they have all these challenges. Or students whose families are Hispanic, some of them, they don't speak English, or they have all these reasons, and many of them are very genuine barriers that those families and the teachers who work with them have to address. But to help put this into perspective, I think that it's important to know a statistic around our national assessment that's called the National Assessment for Educational Progress. It's given in every state. And on that assessment, the Hispanic students in our state at the 4th and 8th grade level are scoring the lowest in the country, last. Okay, so think about who we think is usually last. I'm from Oklahoma, so we'll throw them out there. Mississippi, I don't know, but Rhode Island? Certainly not. And we know that our students are capable of doing better than that. So yes, there are absolutely challenges that we have to address, and we need to support our educators who are working with children who bring those extra challenges to school. But we have to put into perspective that while those challenges exist, it does not excuse away our current performance. We have work that we need to do as educators in our state to improve that. Now, what's really exciting is that we have models of performance happening in our state. So we have some great examples, and we certainly do nationally, but we have some in our state as well. There's one that comes to mind, that International Charter School in Pawtucket is doing amazing work with students who, of a variety of students, but in particular they're English language learners and students who live in poverty, through a dual language kind of a program and a real community-focused education. That's having tremendous success. And right here in Newport, Rogers High School is making tremendous improvements there, and the principal there, Patty DeCenso, who I know many of you probably know, has taken a big leadership role there, and they've dramatically increased the graduation rate. Student achievement is looking up, and I think that's really a high school to watch, and it's one that you all should pay attention to and be proud of, to know that it's right here on the island. So there is, what's encouraging, I know I'm giving kind of bad news, but what I want you to know is that there is not just hope, which is our state motto, but real possibilities, right there in front of us. The ability is there for us to do this together as a state. And I know you guys have probably heard me say that our goal is not little. Our goal is what Jim Collins calls big, hairy, audacious goals. So we're going to set a big, hairy, audacious goals. We're not, puttering around with any little rinky-dinky goals. So our goal is to have the best public education system in the country. Right now, when you look at our overall performance, we're at about average on just about any performance. Our neighbor, Massachusetts, is currently the state that holds that title, and there's absolutely nothing that's preventing us from getting there. We have the resources that we need. We have fantastic families and students who I know are ready for the challenge, educators who I know are ready for the challenge. We have to make sure that we challenge our own system that we're within, check our own expectations about performance, our own assumptions, our own weddedness to where we are right now, and be willing to push ourselves and push each other respectfully and collaboratively, but to really challenge and push each other in order for us to get there. Now, I have a whole lot of other things to say, but I think I probably am at about time. Am I? Okay, if I could, she says very nicely, if you could wrap up, that would be good. So I know that you guys are going to get into groups, and I didn't show you my props, but that's okay. But we're going to come back together in a little while, and I want to make sure that we have an exchange, because I learned from these, and I want to hear from you. But right now, you all are going to work together. I'm going to be around, so so I can listen to the conversations that you're having, and I'm going to stick around the whole evening so that I can learn from your dialogue. So thank you for coming out tonight. I look forward to continue chatting with you.
Thank you. As noted, one of the really unusual aspects to these forums that are very different than the public convenings that the Daily News and the Newport County Fund have done in the past is that now you're going to break into smaller groups that will be facilitated, and hopefully using some of the information that the Commissioner has just shared with you, talk about some of the challenges and some of the visions and some of the goals that we have. I know on the program at least that the topics are a little bit vague, but they're kind of talking about some of these same things. What kind of skills will students need to be successful in the new economy? And what kind of programs are we going to need in our schools and in our communities to support those kinds of skills? And I think that conversation also lends itself to what are some of those resources that we already have in the community, and trying to bring those together. And the third component of all of these forums in the breakout sessions has been leadership and collaboration. Who's going to lead this effort, and how are we going to work together to get to these goals? And I think that's been something that, for all of the organizations that have supported this series, has been very important, especially in Newport County and especially on Aquidneck Island. We have a lot of great organizations and a lot of great people doing a lot of great things, and I think there's a lot of sense that if we could just get the right people together, maybe we could really make some of that forward progress, and just kind of have that assessment of what is going on in the community and how we can join resources. Where's Joyce? There's Joyce. So we're going to go into the breakout sessions now, and you're going to have conversations. There'll be a reporting out back here in this room, and then we're going to ask you to vote on a series of questions using the electronic voting system that's being provided by VHB. And the Commissioner will be here wandering around, and also has expressed willingness to talk afterwards too. So we definitely want to take advantage of that opportunity. So have fun.
Okay, just so you know where you're going when you register, you came in, everybody should